And
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
already time. Then
Yes.
Karthik has sent a message that we should continue. He is not going to join.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes.
and I have opened the book. And then last time we had a sort of a discussion on the concept of the mirror and image and all that. One full chapter on that. So I told that I would do some homework on that and then try to uh, theorize or whatever I know can be put across. But
Yes.
I couldn't do the whole effort. But what I have seen is I will share my screen.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
I'll get how do I come back to that screen? I just I'll share the screen. Hope the screen is visible. So we are supposed to start from here. Page number 276, Prakriti, Maya and Purush, God. Not this one. Yes, same thing. Before this, I will just go back to the diagram which we had seen last time. This is the diagram which had a lot of details in the whole chapter. So what I see here is there is a sort of a say juxtaposing two ideas. The sanskaras are put together as sort of a different types of mirror that we have in front of us, which reflects and doesn't show the reality, which reflects depending on what it is having or what it is covered with, and whether we can see without the mirror. These are the ideas which came to my mind. And this is the whole process of the evolution also, and then the involution also, and then finally realization. So here, uh, am I heard?
Yes,
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 Mama.
listening to you.
Yes, okay,
Yes, we
okay.
are listening.
Uh, we start with the eye of the infinite mind, that is the God, and then you have two lines. So it is as good as, say, the BIM starting off with a finite and infinite limb, A and B. And the finite limb goes through, this is actually not the exact replica of what is that diagram, but here we see that this is the evolutionary limb on the left side, cross glasses of infinite mind. So they are covered with so much of, say, sanskaras that it is better not to call them as glasses, but sheets which are slightly polished, which gives a the faint image of a person in front of him, in front of that
Basically, the
sheets.
mind becomes, yeah, basically the mind becomes like a mirror of the
Ah,
sanskaras we have and reflects on it. So
yes,
then the process of accumulation of dust of the sanskaras on the mind starts. So
mind.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what I felt was in the process of evolution, this mirror is actually not actually a mirror, but a polished surface of a, say, stone or a metal or things like that, which still reflects something of you, but holds back so much that you can't see anything further. So we need to go through all that and then cross over that, and then that is why it is known as seeing inside out the mirror of creation. That is, we are influenced so much with creation that what we see is only through the effects of creation, not the reality. So it is the duality because of creation, that what we see is always totally covered totally, say, given a different perspective than what is their real or actuality. So as we pass through this and gain, say, knowledge, our imagination slightly reduces, and then we go through the process of this involution process where the subtle classes, mental classes influence us, and then as we go through this, our sanskaras, here you can see that the sanskaras are reducing. Subtle sanskaras, we lose that in the 4 planes, and then mental sanskaras, we lose them in the next 3 planes. So that is a way of representing and using them as some sort of a glass through which we see ourselves or the real self, seeing from outside the mirror of creation. So we are seeing here not so much influenced by the creation. The imagination is not colored by creation. So as we go through this process, we become clearer and clearer of what we see. And what we see actually is our own self. So the mirror reflects what we are. The real self is to be seen from outside to inside. Seeing infinite mind's reflection as subtle mental and creation, mental creation. So once we reach this 7th plane and cross over, so there is no mirror at all. So we are actually what we are. There is no more process of seeing from outside. So it is, say,
Mirror.
manifesting. Yes, mirror is lost there, and
Yes.
you manifest the self in you. So that is gone. Seeing beyond the mirror of creation, beyond the mirror, realization of infinite mind. So these are the few thoughts which came to me when we were reading last time. I was not able to go through the whole process, and this we can in some way compare with the other diagram which we have studied earlier. So this is almost a different way of projecting the same concepts, and then the duality. Uh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, where is this diagram available? What you are showing?
This is on page
On the same
263
book.
in the book.
The
Same
same book.
book. We read
Okay.
this last week.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the chapter starting with thinking, and this
Okay.
is what we covered last week. So this whole
Very
chapter.
nicely explained, Aman. Yeah, very nicely explained. Yeah.
Okay. Ashok, you have any thoughts on this?
No, this is really is in sync with what we've seen in the other charts and what is
Yes, yes.
literature on evolution. So I think this book is uh, giving in details our 14 stage journey, 7 which we have completed by getting full consciousness in the human form, and 7 of involution. And this diagram now is clearer. The concepts are clearer, and what you say makes sense.
Yes, yes.
Prima facie.
That's what because as we are reading this book, it is sort of a different or a explanation of God speaks and other concepts which are crystallized there so very finitely. Here he is trying to explain that in different perspectives so that our understanding becomes better. So there
Yes,
is actually, I don't see anything contradictory as such here, but everything is explained in a different way so that we understand the concepts better.
absolutely. It is explanatory. It's just for us to understand the main text or the main content in these courses or God speaks remains.
God speaks, yes. So
Jai
with
Baba.
this, we will continue, start reading from this one, page 276. Prakriti, Maya and Purush, God. Prakriti is the combination of the most fine, finite imagination and false consciousness, the false I, the false ego. Purush is the infinite intelligence of God. Prakriti is what gives life, mind to Purush. Prakriti is what gives life to Purush. Okay. In other words, Prakriti gives the I-ness of Jivatma to Purush. Through Prakriti, Purush attains mind of its intelligence, mind for its intelligence. And with mind, Purush achieves its state of infinite intelligence. The Purush in the varied stages of Prakriti experiences the evolution and manifestation of the most fine, finite imagination. That is, for Purush, absolute nothing becomes everything. Purush thinks falsely. While experiencing Prakriti, evolution and involution, the nothingness of nothing becomes everything for Purush. And as a consequence, Purush in the state of mind thinks falsely, and this false thinking becomes infinite. This is once again we can put this as the at the point of whim. What happens? So Prakriti and Purush. Maya is Prakriti and Purush is God. So the God gets covered with the false idea of duality or the creation, and then it goes through all the process. False thinking produces imagination. When false thinking becomes infinite in the state of man, it produces infinite imagination, which is experienced by man. This imagination is necessary to expand the consciousness of the mind so that Purush, the infinite intelligence, can experience its infinite mind. So this is the, I think this is a very crux of the matter. So what is the need? Why do we go through all this process? The imagination is necessary to expand the consciousness. So the consciousness needs to become bigger and bigger and maturer and maturer. And that is the need so that Purush, the infinite intelligence, can experience its infinite mind. There are various states of infinite imagination that Purush, the infinite intelligence, must pass through before attaining its ultimate state of being infinitely intelligent Puratan Purush. Infinitely intelligent Puratan Purush. This first state of Purush as infinite intelligence is in the form of unconscious intelligence, that is its original state of the beyond. This state of Purush, that is the Puratan Purush, the first state of Purush as infinite intelligence is in the form of unconscious intelligence, that is its original state in the beyond. The second state of infinite intelligence is in the form of infinite mind, that is as infinite false mind, the creator. The infinite thinker who creates the universe, the God who is infinite unconsciousness is Ishwar, and imagination of the infinite thinker is the unconscious movement of creation. The third state of infinite intelligence is the unconscious infinite mind in the form of stone, metal, and vegetable, the most limited false mind. Imagination is most finite. Infinite intelligence in the fourth state is unconscious infinite mind in the form of worm, insect, reptile, fish, bird to animal. The limited false mind, imagination is finite once again. Most finite too, it has become finite. Fifth is infinite intelligence in the form of infinite unconscious mind, that is, its state of the false, conscious, limited mind in the form of the human being. I will stop here. Any discussion? This is sort of explanation of the process of evolution. Okay, I will continue. Okay. In man, imagination is infinite, but human gross consciousness imagines only a sphere of infinite matter, things. If human consciousness is subtle, yogi, mahayogi, kuber, it imagines only a sphere of infinite energy, powers. That is a subtle world or subtle sphere. If the human consciousness is mental, Vali, Pir, Shiv, Kailash, it imagines only a sphere of infinite thoughts or feelings, mental sphere. The sixth state of infinite intelligence is the infinite real mind. That is, its state of real conscious, unlimited mind. The God realized human being who is conscious of divinity, the infinite self in the state of Vidyan, infinite knowledge which is beyond imagination. This word, infinite knowledge which is beyond imagination, is quite illustrative. So, only at the end of all the imaginations that we get the infinite knowledge. Till that time, our imagination clouds the real knowledge or true knowledge. In the seventh state, infinite intelligence is in the form of infinite real mind, the infinite imagination, God consciousness, and creation consciousness. That is, its state as the perfect master who is conscious of divinity, his godhood, and conscious of imagination, his humanity. The real mind, Purush, is infinite, and it is in all of creation. But since infinite intelligence is unconscious in every form of creation, evolution and involution, Purush, the real mind, thinks through the limited mind. The limited mind identifies itself as Jivatma and receives its existence from the false mind, Prakriti. Both real mind, Purush, and false mind, Prakriti, are infinite. But the real mind is substance, Purush is intelligence, and false mind is shadow, Prakriti is ignorance. They are existent in every human being, but only the perfect master is conscious of both. In man, mind imagines an infinite number of imaginings by thinking an infinite number of thoughts. Therefore, the term infinite false mind is used to describe this nature and quality of mind in human form. In man, mind is infinite but false. So, in man, mind is infinite but it is false. Infinite false mind experiences infinite limitations. The limit it faces is infinite. In the Sadguru, infinite real mind experiences no limitation. The infinity it faces is its own infiniteness. The infinity it faces is its own infiniteness. Man experiences infinite imaginations through the multiple and divisional impressions of the gross, subtle, and mental spheres. The Sadguru experiences the infinite imagination as one individual infinite mind, without impressions, without limit. Prakriti as the infinite false imagination is one and indivisible in its original form in the beyond. But Prakriti creates manyness instead of oneness. The Sadguru experiences this manyness and divisions as zero of zeros. He experiences the infinite number of imaginations as the nothings of nothingness, nothings of nothingness. The Sadguru knows that behind the innumerable imaginations, through the innumerable limited minds, is the infinite false mind, which was originally one with infinite real mind in the unconscious behind. The Sadguru is in the conscious beyond, where infinite mind is one. He experiences the infinite real mind behind the infinite false mind. This is the experience of Puratan Purush. I'll stop here. Any discussion on this? We have completed this chapter, Puratan Purush.
No, Mamaji, no discussion. I think it's just a elaboration of what we have read earlier.
Yes, yes. So
we
each
have
chapter is trying to put in a different way the whole process of evolution, involution, and then the realization, and then the stages of realization up to the Sadguru level in clarity.
and I think the analogy of the movie screen also is quite a strong analogy that we are all having imagination like a movie, but actually
Yes, yes,
the screen behind is from the
that is
is
the
totally
reality.
pure and pristine, like in our soul. So
Yes,
we can't see the clear, pristine soul behind the movie screen.
yes.
I think it's quite clear. No, please continue.
Okay. So next chapter, the state of man. In infinite intelligence is contained infinite thinking and the most fine infinite imagination and the most finite imagination. Infinite thinking, the infinite intelligence is contained infinite thinking and the most finite imagination. When the infinite thinking starts, the most limited, most finite imagination assumes infinitely mental, subtle, and gross forms. In the beginning of creation, when infinite thinking starts, the infinite thinking assumes extremely great and yet most limited form at the same time. Extremely great and yet most limited form at the same time. By thinking, then, infinite intelligence commences playing two opposite parts. One of creating imagination in extremely limited and most finite form as metals, subtle and gross forms, mental, subtle and gross forms, and the other role of experiencing the mental, subtle and gross worlds through innumerable mental, subtle and gross bodies. So I think this is very clear here. So we have the bodies, worlds, and forms. So by thinking, then infinite intelligence commences playing two opposite parts. One of creating imagination in extremely limited and most finite forms as mental, subtle, and gross forms. And the other role of experiencing the mental, subtle, and gross worlds through innumerable mental, subtle, and gross bodies. This experience of its infinite thinking first begins in the mental world as drops become archangels, and in the subtle world as drops become angels. But the actual conscious progression of its thought to experience the infinite first starts from the stone form in the gross world, archangels, angels, and then the progression that need is, but actual consciousness progression of its thought to experience the infinite first starts from the stone form in the gross world. The conscious experience of infinite thinking by infinite intelligence begins with the first human form, and the conscious infinite thinking begins as man enters evolution. The conscious experience of infinite thinking by infinite intelligence. So, till that time, it is finite thinking. So, now the conscious experience of infinite thinking by infinite intelligence begins with the first human form, and conscious infinite thinking begins as man enters involution. So, involution is a thinking process, whereas conscious experience is the process of human form, what we go through in the human form. So, that is the because of the repeated sanskaras, we keep on experiencing, accumulating impressions of these experiences. But the real thinking doesn't happen in the say reincarnation process of the human form. Only in the involution form, the conscious infinite thinking begins. That's how I understand it. Any inputs on this? So there's a clarity on two aspects. One is uh, the experiencing is reincarnation, and real thinking or infinite conscious infinite thinking is in the involution process. In human form, the infinite intelligence plays two roles, and these two roles produce the state of man. The first role of infinite intelligence is as man when it first begins to think in the waking state. This thinking creates action in the infinite mental, subtle, and gross forms out of the extremely limited and most finite imagination, the sanskaric seed stored in the man's mental body. The second infinite intelligence through man experiences all the infinite action that it created, the mental, subtle, and gross consciousness of the mental, subtle, and gross forms in the respective spheres. Through man experiences all the infinite action. I am not clear about this. I will read once again. In human form, the infinite intelligence plays two roles, and these two roles produce the state of man. The first role of infinite intelligence is as man when it first begins to think in the awakening state. This thinking creates action in the infinite mental, subtle, and gross forms out of the extremely limited and most finite imagination, the sanskaric seed stored in the man's mental body. So, imagination and the actions of the gross form is the first one. Second, infinite intelligence through man experiences, with the experiences, all the infinite action that it created, the mental subtle and gross consciousness of the mental subtle and gross forms in the respective spheres. So the second or the involution process is the experiencing. So each previous action and its experience is revisited in the involution process. That's how I understand this. Any inputs, Ashok or others? I am not able to see the screen of the this one Teams, so I don't know who are all with us now. Yes, come on board, talk. Let me know who are all there on the.
Yeah. Only three of us still, Mamaji.
Only three of us.
Only
Okay,
three of
okay.
Only three of
Yes.
us still.
Okay.
Yeah.
So continuing, observe the state of infinite mind in action through man. When the infinite mind as man goes into deep sleep state, meaning its original unconscious state of the beyond, infinite mind acts as the dissolver, Mahesh. When in man infinite mind emerges in the awakening state, it acts as the creator, Brahma, and when as man it fully awake and aware, it acts as the preserver, Vishnu. When infinite mind through man in the awake state experiences creation in the gross, subtle, and mental spheres, it works in the human form. During the dream state, infinite mind draws within itself the gross world, when for the time being the mirror or gross visible creation becomes useless. Mirror becomes useless. Okay. During the dream state, infinite mind draws within itself the gross world, when for the time being the mirror becomes useless. The mirror is the gross visible creation. A dream is a semi-conscious state midway between the awake state of everyday life experience and the deep sleep state where nothing is experienced. Man has to pass through the dream state, the astral level, prior to entering deep sleep, and again passes through the dream state before awakening from deep sleep. So this is a sort of a repeat of what we have read already. For subtle or mental conscious person, this does not apply. When the subtle conscious person falls asleep, he first passes from his respective subtle plane into the mental sphere and then into the beyond. The mental conscious person who falls asleep passes from his mental plane into the beyond. Both the subtle and mental conscious persons are dreaming the divine dream while awake with eyes open, while an ordinary man dreams while asleep with eyes closed. So I think this is quite clear. So as we are all, man dream state is slightly going towards the astral plane from the gross plane, whereas person who is in the involution and if he is in the subtle plane, he moves higher from there in the dream state. And the other thing is he is actually awake and not sleeping, whereas man is always sleeping when he is dreaming. And those involutionary, say, people in the involutionary tree in the mental sphere, they go slightly beyond that in their dream state, which is in the awake state of them itself. So that is how the progress is shown here. When the individual infinite mind awakens from deep sleep, it acts as the creator. While awakening, it creates the most fine, formless universe in mental, subtle, and gross forms. At the time of awakening, it then creates the mental world and mental body into the subtle world and subtle body. At the moment of awakening from dreaming, it creates the subtle world and subtle body into a gross world and gross body. It is the reverse process. So the awakening process is awakening into the mental plane and then into the subtle plane and then into the gross body. Say mental body, gross body, and the subtle body and the gross body. Infinite mind, when in human form, is the individual infinite mind. Infinite mind, when in human form, is the individual infinite mind. When infinite mind as man enters deep sleep, it is in the original state of infinite intelligence. It is then that infinite mind acts as the dissolver. In sound sleep, by reading this, I will just read it once again and then tell what my idea is. Infinite mind, when in human form, is the individual infinite mind. So there are multiple minds. Each drop soul has a mind. So it is the individual infinite mind. When infinite mind as man enters deep sleep, it is the original state of infinite intelligence. So that is the unitary infinite intelligence, God state actually. So all drop souls go into this particular stage, which is the unitary infinite intelligence. It is then that infinite mind acts as the dissolver. So because all of them come into a single stage, that's why it is known as dissolution or dissolver. In the sound sleep, the individual infinite mind takes unto itself the mental, subtle, and gross worlds in their most fine, finite, formless form. The three spheres are in the most fine sensoric seed form. When this individual infinite mind goes into the dream state from the awake state, it takes with it the gross world in a subtle form, astral. When the individual infinite mind enters into deep sleep from the dream state, it takes with it the subtle world in mental form, that is in the most finite form in deep sleep. The sanskaric seed lie dormant in most fine form, still and minute without thought, desire, or forms. While a human being sleeps, his individual infinite mind draws in the gross world into a subtle form, then the subtle world into mental form, and the mental world into a fine seed that lies dormant. The gross body and world, which are there for the normal man in the waking state, both merge into subtle form in the dream state. In the deepest sleep state, the subtle body and the subtle world merge along with the gross into the mental form, and this mental form is most fine, finite, and formless. I will stop here for some time. We can have a discussion. So, this process of, say, involuting while from awake state to the dream state to the uh, deep sleep state. So we take the gross into the subtle, and then this package of gross and subtle into the mental. So each level is taking away its effects. In the gross form, we have actions, we have all the deeds done. That is stopped, and that is taken into the subtle world where the say parked feelings or the emotions are felt, and then the energy is packaged. That is taken into the mental sphere where all the desires and other things are becoming dormant or seed forms. So that is the deep sleep state. So this is the reverse progress. And in the other way, mind starts as the initial form, and then the subtle form, and then the cross form. So this is the to and fro progress which happens in the formation of the human form, and then the activities of the daily human form, which is equated to the total evolution and involution. Any other inputs on this?
No, Mamaji, continue.
Okay.
This continuous
Okay.
reading you are doing. Yeah.
Jivatma. False thinking by the infinite intelligence, Purush, is Jivatma, the mind thinking falsely. So this is the fine definition. False thinking by the infinite intelligence, that is Purush, is Jivatma, the mind thinking falsely. And Prakriti is what gives Jivness or I-ness to Purush. And Prakriti is what gives Jivness or the I-ness to Purush. This
Yeah,
Jivatma,
individuality.
yes,
Yeah.
individual I-ness. This Jivatma is formless in the beginning and experiences creation through bodies according to sanskaras. But the origin of Prakriti, Maya, nature, is also formless, meaning the original Prakriti is formless in the beginning. This original Prakriti is formless in the beginning and then formless and then the origin. This links to our science also, where we say the whole of evolution starts with nothing, and then gases, and then the metals, all those things. So that
The
is also
Prakriti itself, yeah, the Prakriti itself means creation, you know.
creation. Yes,
We call Prakriti also creation, or the nature,
yes. Nature,
or
nature.
the, yeah, nature as in a sense of what we see around, and also the nature of the mind,
Mind.
you know.
Yes.
The behavioral pattern also is called Prakriti.
Okay.
So that's all creates all that. Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
Baba.
Yeah. So basically, Sanjay ji, valid point. So you're talking about both internal and external mind.
Yes,
What the
yes.
mind sees externally, what internally.
Yeah, the gross Prakriti, that is creation, and the Prakriti of the mind, the inquisitive mind, the mischievous chicken.
Yes,
Ah, yes.
mischievous chicken.
Yes,
All the
yes.
imaginations, all the things
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on in the mind.
Right. Yeah, Baba.
Jai Baba.
Yes, okay. But the origin of Prakriti, Maya, nature, is formless, meaning the original Prakriti is formless in the beginning. Prakriti is combination of false knowledge and ignorance. And this combination makes up the original most fine finite form or body of infinite mind. Originally, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, the pure nothing, the formless, bodiless nothing. When this nothing comes out and manifests through new innumerable forms, then through false knowledge it becomes everything. Nothing is ignorance, and this ignorance also comes out in countless forms. To make nothing as everything is false knowledge. And it is this false knowledge that gives ignorance I-ness. Thus, the combination of false knowledge and ignorance continues the Jivatma falsely thinking, taking itself to be I, and takes nothing to be everything. When infinite intelligence began to think, this formless Prakriti took form as Brahmanand, the mental form, Pran, the subtle form, and Kaya, the gross form. This also we have gone through in one full chapter, the Brahmanand, Pran, and Kaya earlier. When infinite intelligence began to think, this formless Prakriti took form as Brahmanand, that is the mental form, Pran, the subtle form, and the Kaya, the gross form. When the gross body drops, Prakriti in the form of sanskaras remains. When the gross body drops, Prakriti in the form of sanskaras remain with the Jivatma. After death, Prakriti remains with the formless, bodiless Jivatma in a condition of formless sanskaras. The imprint of the sanskaras remain in the mental body. The impressions of the sanskaras fall in the formless mental body of the Jivatma formlessly. To experience the impressions of the sanskaras, the Jivatma finds the formless Prakriti in the form of mental, subtle, and gross bodies. Through these mental, subtle, and gross bodies, the Jivatma uses the sanskaras, thus continuing the chain of births and deaths. Jivatma, I-ness, mind, does not die. Its gross physical body dies. Jivatma is the Purush, the infinite intelligence, thinking falsely in the state of limited mind, and on the dropping of one body, it takes a new body according to its new sanskaras. The falling of its old body, shell, and taking of a new form is the birth and death of the gross body, not I or mind or ego. So, mind, ego, or I-ness remains. After the extermination of all sanskaras in Nirvana, the Jivatma gains knowledge of self in Nirvikalp, and its false thinking ends as limited mind goes. All extermination of After extermination of all sanskaras in Nirvana, the Jivatma gains knowledge of self in Nirvikalp, and its false thinking ends as limited mind goes. In Nirvana Nirvikalp, the I-ness of false limited self disappears, and also does Prakriti and the creation. So I-ness also goes off as the Prakriti and creation also leave that. Then mind exists as indivisible, infinite, and eternal, the infinite mind with complete knowledge of itself. That is the gain. We are getting the complete knowledge, the infinite mind with complete knowledge of itself.
Correct,
At,
Mamaji. I just wanted to
yes, yes,
add that there's only one real birth and one real death. So
yes, yes.
when we are having reincarnation or when we are getting another body, that is not the real birth or the real death. So I
Yes.
think that, supplement 19 is can be referred to here for
Okay,
better
okay.
understanding. Jai Baba.
At realization, the truth, knowledge that was in binding knows I am indivisible, I am one, I am unchangeable. All things done through false thinking were done through Prakriti, not my real I self, capital S self. Since the beginning of time, I was doing all things in illusion. This is a nice statement by the realized soul. At realization, the truth, knowledge that was in binding till that time, what it knows is I am indivisible, I am one, I am unchangeable. All things done through false thinking were done through Prakriti, not my real I or the self. Since the beginning of time, I was doing all things in illusion. So that is the realization. And these terms are, say, in the Parvatigar prayer, the indivisible, I am one, I am unchangeable, all these things are terms there in that Parvatigar prayer. At realization, knowledge consciously knows its origin as it was always was, always is, and always will be Shiva. At realization, knowledge consciously knows its origin as it always was, always is, and always will be. Shiva. Jiva becomes Shiva, that which alone exists, and that experience is knowledge. That which alone exists, this knowledge is the real knowledge. Jiva, I-ness, mind exists because of false thinking. This I-ness is the assertion of the false self in Jivatma that keeps it thinking falsely continuously. And as the Jivatma is there thinking falsely, there is Prakriti also continuing the process. It is because of Prakriti that there is experience of creation, and the experience is the limit of the limited mind. False thinking doing through Prakriti is because of sanskaras. False thinking or false doing through Prakriti is because of sanskaras. If the sanskaras are destroyed, the false thinking and false doing stops, and with it goes all false knowledge of the universes. This is the moment of annihilation of limit in Nirvana. Annihilation of limit, that is Nirvana. Then only remains the Purush, the truth in Nirvikal, conscious God who is ever free and who does not have to do anything. Conscious God who is ever free and who does not have to do anything. The binding force of Prakriti, the sanskaras, is due to the combination of false knowledge and ignorance. This force is the infinite false thinking of limited I mind. He who becomes free from binding of Prakriti through the remains, though he remains in Prakriti in the body, exists as if he is not in Prakriti. He lives as if has no body, has no body, he does nothing because he experiences self as God, soul without body. He who becomes free from binding of Prakriti, though he remains in Prakriti, that is in the body, exists as if he is not in Prakriti. He lives as if he has no body, he does nothing because he experiences self as God, soul without body. The nothing that was taken as everything is a mere dream, an imagination, an emptiness, and this is known as the moment of realization. The nothing that was taken as everything is a mere dream, an imagination, an emptiness, and this is known at the moment of realization. After gaining this knowledge, those who use Prakriti for the salvation of others as a channel out of illusion are the Sadgurus. I will stop here. I'll just come back. Yes, what we see through and through is different ways of explaining and making things clearer of the whole process of evolution, reincarnation, involution, and what we sort of achieve by living everything. That is realization. Continuing, then for the unconscious Purush, infinite intelligence in the beyond, to become divinely conscious, infinitely intelligent, Prakriti is the medium one has to use. So that is the importance of Prakriti. Unless we have Prakriti, this unconscious Purush, infinite intelligence in the beyond, to become divinely conscious, infinitely intelligent is not possible. So we need Prakriti for that.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Provisional ego. We read. Yeah.
Yes. When the Purush once knows and experiences who he is, Prakriti vanishes. And the Purush then, through the channel of Prakriti, uses knowledge as the Puratan Purush, Sadguru, for the spiritual good of others. When the Purush once knows and experiences who he is, Prakriti vanishes, and the Purush then, through the channel of Prakriti, uses knowledge as the Puratan Purush, Sadguru, for the spiritual good of others. So, what I saw through all this is that in different, spiritual literature, they give stress on, some give stress, lot of stress on consciousness alone. That they say the ultimate fully consciousness is God. They equate consciousness to God. The other say way of looking at in different literature, in spiritual literature, is uh, the progress from the false I to the real I. That is the false self to the real self is taken as man to God. That is how they interpret. So the slight importances are varied from each one, but the concept and everything is the same. Any inputs on this? Because how we different religions, the religious spiritual literature, not the ritualistic literature, looks at the final concept of
Yes.
God.
Yes.
It slightly varies from each one, but all of them are gelled in the same process as what we are reading.
Yeah, I think it's just a reflection of seeing from which direction you want to see. You want to see from
Ah,
consciousness direction
yes,
or from I, or because when you are fully conscious, your I goes at.
yes, I goes. That the false I
That's a,
goes.
yeah, yeah. And then you realize that Am Brahmasmi.
Yes,
Uh,
there is only one I, that is the God. So I am God, or everything else, everything is God, single unitary God. Ashok, any inputs on this? Okay, I will continue. This chapter is, as we were discussing, it has come to consciousness. Consciousness, the mind in stone form, eventually becomes the mind of Sadguru, the infinite real conscious mind. So that is the progress from stone to Sadguru. The mind in stone form eventually becomes the mind of the Sadguru, the infinite real conscious mind. It is mind that develops from the most finite state of unconsciousness, infinitely unconsciousness, to become the conscious infinite consciousness, Maha Chaitanya. The mind that develops from the most finite state of unconsciousness, unconscious infinite unconsciousness, unconscious infinite unconsciousness, to become the conscious infinite consciousness, Maha Chaitanya. To develop its consciousness, mind makes an apparent journey. Apparent journey. The unconscious infinite intelligence, in order to become conscious infinite intelligence, starts its journey from stone form to reach human form without interruption through natural sanskaras. So that is evolution. So what is evolution defined here is a journey from stone form to reach human form without interruption through natural sanskaras. In other words, the sanskaras during evolution are natural, and these natural impressions are necessary to propel the mind's consciousness from stone to man. So, so that is the importance of sanskaras. They are required. unless these sanskaras are there, which are called natural, we cannot progress from the stone to man stage. This propelling of consciousness is without interruption until mind reaches the state of man. The original whim to know itself, the lahar, became the first natural sanskara, who am I? This first natural sanskara gives a push to the consciousness emerging from the mental and subtle worlds, so that mind reaches the stone form uninterruptedly. The first sanskara pushes the undeveloped mind through the mental and subtle worlds unconsciously into the gross world to become embodied as stone consciously. Oh, I'll read this one. The first sanskara pushes the undeveloped mind through the mental and subtle worlds unconsciously into the gross world to become embodied as stone consciously. And natural sanskaras prevail as man evolves to man. Natural sanskaras prevail as mind evolves to man. The infinite intelligence started its journey in the beginningless beginning. It's nice, beyond, BB, the beginningless beginning, from the absolute unconsciousness to reach the infinite consciousness, but its journey was interrupted in human form. The journey is interrupted in the human form. In man, the unnatural sanskaras of infinite false knowledge, the infinite false ego, false I, prevent infinite intelligence from progressing uninterruptedly. Here and now, unnatural samskaras in the form of the limited mind, the limited I, obstructs man from realizing the self, the infinite conscious mind, the infinite real ego. So this is a nice exposition. I think it is better to read it once again. The infinite intelligence started its journey in the beginningless beginning from absolute unconsciousness to reach the infinite consciousness, but its journey was interrupted in the human form. So that is what happens after the evolution. So this reincarnation is our own self-made problem. That's how I look at it. So we can reform that by realizing and then trying to avoid sanskaras. In the man, the unnatural sanskaras of infinite false knowledge, the infinite false ego, false I, prevent infinite intelligence from progressing uninterruptedly. Otherwise, we can progress uninterruptedly. Here and now, unnatural sanskaras in the form of limited mind, the limited I, obstruct man from realizing the self, the infinite conscious mind, the infinite real ego. Any ideas here? So we create recreations, say reincarnation. So it is in our hands to reduce the number of reincarnations and then progress towards evolution. And if we use our I, the ego-ness, so the reincarnation keeps happening. That's why we may need 84 lakh lives to realize this and move further.
Correct. Kabir typically kind of gave a simile of chadar, sheet, which is given by Guru or God to you, and then we keep it, keep on making it dirty and dirty and dirty, unless we clean it and be ready with the spotless white sheet. That's what is aim of aspirant is actually.
Okay. So sheet is the actually
sheet,
we
white
can
sheet,
take that white sheet as the clean mind. that the Sadguru
Yes,
bestows on
yeah,
us, but we muddy that
yes,
with all our thinking,
absolutely.
imagination, experiences, and all that
Right.
sanskaras.
Yes, 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 yes.
Thank you.
Jai Baba, the one song comes to my mind. I think it's of either of Anup Jalota. मैली चादर ओढ़ के कैसे द्वार तुम्हारे आऊं मैं, which means having a dirty
Ah,
sheet. How can I even
enter your
traverse on the journey towards Godhood?
yes. So we have to remove that chadar or clean that chadar to make it spotless
Yes,
mind or the empty mind.
or the analogy of the movie screen, which is white, and we have so many
Yes,
sanskar.
yes.
Jai Baba.
Yeah. I'll continue. What happened? In man, unnatural sanskaras compel infinite intelligence to change its body many times, taking a new body again and again, reincarnating 84 lakh times. Before entering the process of involution, the unnatural sanskaras must be wiped out. During involution, the natural samskaras are less binding, and infinite intelligence gradually transits its limits from gross conscious intelligence in ordinary man to subtle conscious intelligence in the yogi and mental conscious intelligence in Kailash. Once infinite intelligence attains mental consciousness, it has attained the state of pure mind. It ascends without hindrance to super consciousness. The unfoldment and infoldment of consciousness is natural, and the development of consciousness flows in uninterruptedly like a stream. There are rushing waters in the stream, and on one bank, a branch from a tree falls into the water, pushed by the breeze of the wind. There are rushing waters in the stream, and on one bank, a branch from a tree falls into the water, pushed by the breeze of the wind. The branch, which now a stick in the water, represents the drop soul embodied as the Jivatma, which is pushed by the inner force of the beam to emerge and be conscious on the other side of the bank. The stick has to reach the other side, the goal. It floats in the stream and is moved by currents. The force of the currents represents sanskaras. The Jivatma must journey from the infinitely unconscious side to the infinitely conscious side through the stream's movement. The stream bed has a slope of 5 levels. Each basic level represents a foundation of consciousness that does not give way amidst the currents. This first level is the solid but almost unconscious stone. The second level represents subconsciousness as energy, Chaitanya emerging in plant forms. And the third represents consciousness in the still less and less unconscious forms, the worms, insects, reptiles, fish, and birds. The fourth level is the still less unconscious forms of animals. The most conscious of the animals are the monkeys. And the fifth level represents consciousness as complete in man. So this is a repeating story in this book. Repeatedly, we have seen this 5 levels, starting from the stone to the man stage. The stick in the water, the Jivatma in the current of life, has to float past these levels to reach the goal. Jiva mind has to float beyond, that is known as transcend these levels, even beyond the state of man to attain super consciousness of Shiva. The slope in the stream bed goes straight up until the level of a conscious human being is reached, where there is a huge heap of dirt, the unnatural samskaras of infinite false ego mind, in which the stick gets stuck as if in mud. The slope in the stream of consciousness goes naturally straight up from the stone to man without interruption, obstruction, but the huge heap of dirt at the level of the human form prevents the stick from moving further. Thus begins the rounds of births and deaths. In the man, the unnatural sanskaras accumulate and they form more dirt, unnaturalness. It takes many cycles to remove the heap of dirt. The process of reincarnation is for this purpose. But after its removal, the stick progresses along again. When the Jivatma progresses into the subtle realm, it comes across another interruption of sanskaras, but this one is a heap of germs and treasures. The subtle planes with their powers, siddhis, gems and treasures. The subtle realm is the sphere of enchantment, Hayrat. Therein are marvelous sights, enchanting fragrances, enticing melodies, entrancing melodies, heavenly palaces and temples. Jiva, the stick, becomes entrapped in this heap of treasures. This heap of gems, the subtle realm, is indeed treasure unknown to normal man, but it is really just a heap that must be removed so that mind may progress further. Its removal also takes a long time, approximately 700,000 years. Once the treasures are set aside, the powers given up, Shiva, the humble stick, now so thin and fine, again progresses uninterruptedly by degrees of mental consciousness towards the realizing of Shiva. It takes an unimaginably long time for a soul to journey from the unconscious state of a stone to human consciousness, yet there is no interruption in its journey until man. The entire transmigration of evolving consciousness is natural. It is only in human form that obstructions occur due to the unnaturalness of false knowledge in gross conscious man and in the subtle conscious man due to the overwhelming enchantments. So, in the unnaturalness is false knowledge in gross
Very,
conscious mass and overwhelming enchantments in the subtle conscious man.
so we are our own obstacles, actually.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Beautifully
Yes,
explained
sir.
here.
The unnatural sanskaras of the gross conscious man manifest as a pile of rubbish. When gross unnaturalness is wiped away, progress is again obstructed in the subtle realm by the enchantments experienced in the subtle planes, especially the fourth plane where there is danger of misuse of occult powers and consequent fall. In the beginning, there is unconscious infinite intelligence, and in the end is the full self consciousness, the conscious infinite intelligence itself. The unconscious conscious states of stone, vegetable, worm, fish, bird, animal, and man are imaginary states of evolving consciousness. These imaginings are only a channel, the stream itself of unconscious soul as Jiva to become conscious soul, the Shiva, in the experience of Mahachaitanya, is the experience of Mahachaitanya. Uh, the unconscious, conscious state of stone, vegetable, worm, fish, bird, animal, and man are imaginary states of evolving consciousness. These imaginings are only a channel, the stream itself the unconscious soul as Jiva to become conscious soul, Shiva, in the experience of Chaitanya. To attain this super consciousness, the soul has to pass from semi-conscious through evolution to full gross human consciousness and thence enter the inner planes of evolution. There is no other way for experience of self-consciousness. For the first soul, it was natural all the way, but not for any man after him. For the first soul, it was natural all the way, but not for any man after him. That is the avatar's characteristics. So he had a natural run to realize himself, the way we can put it. When the unnatural sanskaras, infinite false knowledge, are wiped out to some extent, the false thinking of the mind slows down. Then the human Jivatma ascends the subtle and mental planes until the subtle and mental sanskaras are wiped away. From stone to ape, to ordinary man, to the subtle conscious yogi and the mental conscious Kailash, everything is illusion. Everything is a state of ignorance, darkness, nothing. This nothing with forms is only a channel through which the soul must pass to ultimately experience infinite intelligence, reality, effulgence, everything. So these are all synonyms, sort of infinite intelligence, reality, effulgence, everything. So for the inexperienced and formless soul, unconscious jiva, to become experienced formless soul, it has to pass through every variety of state and form. Infinite intelligence has to first pass through the most limited condition of thinking atom, the most limited condition of thinking stone, the less limited condition of thinking vegetable, the limited conditioning of thinking worm, fish, bird, animal. Then through the infinite mind, it experiences infinite forms thinking in the state of man as the finite human consciousness. The states from atom to stone, to man to Kailash, are all imaginary forms of illusion, shadows of darkness, and are progressive conditions for unconscious infinite mind to become fully conscious infinite intelligence. Mind to intelligence, infinite mind to infinite intelligence. That is unconscious infinite mind to conscious infinite intelligence. In the beginning, it was the breeze of the infinite being, which from the most finite point stirred all that is unconscious. In the beginning, it was the breeze of the infinite being, which from the most finite point stirred all that is unconscious and all that is conscious within infinity to find a way to itself. And from the beginning to end, the interminable progress of imaginary forms remains as the eternal constant. Eternal constant. So interminable progress of imaginary forms remains as the eternal constant. That is always going on. It is forever, it is going on like that. Yes, any ideas on this chapter? This way of explaining the whole process of whim to the realization. We are almost at 9. So and then we will not start the other chapter, I think. Everything and the nothing. So we will take up tomorrow. So any closing
Yes.
remarks? So all
Yeah.
the 3 or 4 chapters we read today, they have the same thinking or the same storyline as such. So explained in different ways. Each one giving some sort of a clarity on certain finite uh, important points. Yes,
Yes.
Sanjay ji?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have to read and read and read again. Actually, the
Yes,
book
yes,
to be kind of meditated upon.
Ah,
So for deeper clarity.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
Thank you, Mamaji.
after reading 1 or 2 books like this, we may have to go back to say God Speaks to take
Yes.
all these ideas and then crystallize that once again in God Speaks. I think.
Right.
Yes, yes. Okay, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Mamaji. Thank you for reading it
Jai
out.
Baba.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba, Mamaji.
Jai Baba.